Christine, who the heck are you and what are you doing here today? You know, you'd be here for a reason. You know, you are significant of some kind regarding TEDx. I'm not going to steal your thunder or spoil who you are. Lay it on the table. Who are we talking to today?
Gosh, that's a very broad question. I think my day job is I'm a CFO at Roha Group in New York. We're a private equity firm. I have many other hats that I wear. So I'm a TEDx organizer. I think that's why we're here today to have our discussion. But I also am in the doctoral program at UNC for my DBA. I am also a founder of my own speakers bureau and agency. So many things going on. I'll try to stay in my TEDx lane for you today.
So I didn't know you had a speakers bureau as well. Is that a whole bureau you got running or what does that look like?
I do. So this actually started out of TEDx. I was a speaker coach and I started coaching numerous folks at Columbia University. And through that process, I actually met some of the academics who wanted more help on the speaking circuit. So it's been fantastic. We've been open now for about a year and a couple of months and more to come there. It's more for me, I think, an extension of my interest in TEDx. So it's all interrelated.
And what originally got you started? Nobody just, falls into becoming a TEDx organizer accidentally.
Oh, it's such a long story. So it started back, I think, in 2009, which was when TEDx first came out. I was asked to join the team to be an attendee at TEDx Boston, and literally all started from there. I went from an interested attendee to a speaker coach to a TED attendee to then having my own license. This is the first year actually I have my own license. So I applied in May of 24. I've got the license and here we are. Inaugural event is 2025.
Which month is it this year? Because we're recording, just for anybody listening, we're recording in February 2025. When is your event this year?
So we have two pieces. The pre-party, which I'm excited about, is June 13th, and the actual event is Saturday, June 14th.
Cool. What are you most excited for this upcoming event based on the kind of the operations you've done so far leading up to it?
I'm excited for many reasons. One is it's always great to see the fruits of your labor. So selfishly, that's one of the reasons. But I think more broadly and more importantly, it's bringing the community together. We have a close-knit community here in Hickory or Catawba County, North Carolina. So I love to see us invest more in bringing the community together. And I think seeing the speaker roster, there's so much diversity here in terms of our speakers, whether it's an AI and technology track or it's medical or it's social psychology. There's just something for everyone. So I'm really happy to see how this comes together. We've got a lot of dynamic personalities as well.
This might be kind of a controversial question. Is it kind of like being a parent, how you can't pick your favorite child, but you always have one that's the easiest and kind of your favorite, but you don't really want to say it? Is the speakers you've selected kind of like that as well?
I don't think I have a favorite, but I would say we're really excited to have Blaise Aguirre-Yonkis. He was the first person I tapped to do a TEDx talk for me, and I had seen him speak at the FT weekend in DC. Some papers are just falling all over my desk. And he was on board. And I think with him being on board, it really gave me the confidence to go ahead and say, all right, we've got Blaise signed up. Who else is on board? So I don't think I play favorites, but I think that everyone brings something unique to the table for me. And with respect to that particular speaker, it was really kind of the courage to believe that this could be something great. And it's proving to be the case. But I don't think I do. I'm really happy about every role that each speaker plays. That's a great question. It's a tricky question.
And for you, you mentioned how you kind of selected Blaise. What was the speaker selection process like? I know a lot of our listeners are aspiring speakers, professional speakers, and entrepreneurs who speak to other business. So that's maybe a question that an answer would be right in their wheelhouse that they're thinking about.
Normally, there's a speaker application process, but to be honest, I think with my network and the flow that we had our speaker roster done before we even could say open speaker applications. So normally, I think with most TEDx licensees and events, there's a speaker application process. You apply, what do you want to talk about? Why do you want to talk about it? How will that kind of impact things? And you put in usually a sample video and things like that. But for us, we actually didn't open broad speaker applications. And anyone that does write in, by the way, and inquire, we're sort of looking at for 2026. So I'm also pretty much overly organized. So that's another reason why we had this roster done in November for this coming June. So I'd say this is a little bit out of the norm, but it shouldn't always be that way. But we do plan ahead. So if anyone listening really wants to be part of this TEDx, TEDx. I hope to be done with the roster by this October, November for the following year.
Wow. And what can a speaker do to stand out?
I think for me, being brutally honest, it's the selfless proposition. So what I struggle with is when we get applications about, I own my consulting firm and I have this sort of pitch that I want to bring onto the TED stage. And anyone who knows the rules knows that's sort of not the point and frowned upon. So generally what I look for is a great idea and something that's not going to be primarily self-serving, if you will, if I may be honest.
And of the speakers that you selected that were already part of your network, what can those speakers do to increase their likelihood and almost make it unreasonable for a TEDx organizer that they have in their network to not choose them? There's not as clear guidelines or not a clear path of how to do X, and then you have a TEDx organizer tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, come speak at an event, as opposed to submit an application, go through the interview, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I was just talking about this today actually with one of my colleagues because we were talking about how do we set all of our speakers up to be successful. You have Blaze who's done, I think, 2 main stage TED Talks and also TEDx Talks. So someone like that, you're probably less likely to need to coach and things like that. But someone who's never done one, you need to provide guidance. And so to kind of flip the answer to your question around, I think if someone's looking to get on the stage and have that undisputable, we must have them. My first stop would be the guidelines. They're on TED's website. So know the TEDx guidelines, know the rules, know the elements of a great talk, know the permissions. A lot of people get tripped up when they don't have the right permission to say something that's copyrighted. And so there's many, I think, things you can do to set yourself up for success when you're looking to do a TEDx talk that should be table stakes, but unfortunately, I think that's not always the case. And then I think the second thing is look at your talk from the perspective of what I mentioned, where how can this be for the greater good? And what would sharing my thought, my idea, and my experience do for the community? Because I think when you look at it from that more altruistic lens, that's bound to come off better than the pitch about how someone owns their consulting company. And that's just really not helpful as it relates to when I look for TEDx speakers.
And for the speaker that's just delivered an amazing TEDx talk, they get off stage, maybe they wait 6 months and they start seeing the likes and the comments kind of pile up and stack. How should they go about making the decision to either, because their first speaking gig ever was this TEDx talk, how can they make the decision of if it makes sense for them to leverage that and build a speaking business or not? And I think your insight into this would be really interesting because you're both TEDx organizer as well as you operate a speakers bureau, right? So you have a very cool kind of knowledge set that you can answer this question from.
Yeah. It's a difficult question because I don't think it's a one size fits all. I mean, maybe to spin the question a little bit differently is I think a TEDx talk can really be a complementary piece of collateral to whatever personal brand or professional brand someone has. And if that professional brand is speaking, then very clearly a TEDx talk would help to build that foundation to take off. So I don't think there's a recipe for it, but I certainly think it's a key piece of collateral that people will know, the brand recognition is really there. It can be a launch pad. It's something, if someone wants to learn more about a speaker to say, hey, I have a TEDx talk, it's here. This will tell you more about me. I think it's part of that biography that's more than just saying I own a consulting firm. Sorry to keep going back to that example, but I tell you, 80% of the speaker applications we receive are led in with that. And it's something that really is pervasive in the application process for some reason. In the self-nominated applications, I should say, because again, we don't have open speaker applications.
Right. And for one of the academics that you were helping kind of kick off their speaking career, what tended to be the step 1, 2, 3, 4 for the guidance you provided them?
That's going to be a unique case because I think you're talking about one of my clients who I'd met through the TEDx network. They had already an established speaking career. So again, this complemented their existing footprint and continued to help him in the market, this particular client. It isn't something that necessarily launched him into the profile that he has. He already was there, but it's something often that clients and potential clients will say to us, oh, we saw his TEDx talk. And that becomes a conversation piece. And it also demonstrates the fact that he is proficient at public speaking. He excels at public speaking, how powerful he is in that capacity.
And One thing that I'm learning interviewing TEDx organizers is about half will decide the theme, the overall theme of the talk prior to looking for speakers. The other half will wait until they see all the applications, select the speakers, and then pick kind of an umbrella theme that goes over the majority of the ideas they're having at the theme. How did you go about that decision for your TEDx event?
I had the theme before we started. So the theme is amplify. And the thought was to bring really great ideas in and then amplify great ideas out. I try to keep it simple. For me, I wanted a theme that was powerful like that, but not something that was so restricting that it wouldn't allow me to do what I would call multiple tracks, whether it's technology or medicine or social psychology, etc.
And what have you noticed that a lot of the speakers you've accepted? Well, first, how many speakers is it that are going to be speaking at your event?
12.
Okay. And for the speakers that are not like the Blaze, like you mentioned, like that already, got their stuff dialed in, they don't need any help. For the speakers that do need some help, that maybe don't realize how much help they need, what tends to be one thing they need the most help on once they've been accepted to the TEDx stage that you've noticed kind of a pattern on all of these speakers?
Yeah, I'll address that, but maybe to take a step back. I think we have a process at all of the TEDx events I've been involved in that there is kind of, like you said, no favorite student or favorite child, and that there's a certain amount of rigor that goes into everyone's talk. So we always do outlines and scripts and dry runs and things like that. But more specifically, I think the newer speakers, there's sort of three parts to that they usually need help on. One is how do they think through an outline or a script, number one. And so we work through that in sessions one-on-one, kind of like we're doing right now. And then I would say number two is probably the technical elements of a TED or TEDx talk in terms of really delivering the message powerfully in a way that engages the audience, that adheres by TED guidelines, etc. And then the third is to dry run properly. I think we always ask, please be prepared to do 1 or 2 dry runs, ideally at least 2, because you want a chance to dry run, edit, and then dry run again, and hopefully go to final. So those are some of the areas where I usually help new speakers in particular really get their idea crisp and succinct so that they're ready for the stage.
How can someone out there that maybe doesn't realize they have a TEDx idea in them, what questions can they ask themselves to find that idea that would be a TEDx stage worthy idea that you as an organizer know they have in them, but then themselves, they don't even realize it yet?
That's an interesting question. It's probably best answered through a real life experience. So one of my TEDx speakers on the roster didn't approach me, I approached her. And I was referred to her by a mutual friend. And he had said she could do a really interesting TEDx talk. You should talk to her. So I called her up. We had a conversation. And she said, I never thought about doing a TEDx talk. The thing that struck me about her, this doesn't apply, it's not a one size fits all, was that she had a really interesting career. And it was an area that I'm not very familiar with. She's a director on Broadway. And so I thought, it'd be really interesting to hear from her perspective how someone delivers a message or does storytelling, because that's part of her day-to-day. That's part of her art. And how do we bring that to the TEDx stage and do something a little bit different? So it's really hard to say how everyone can foster that same level of creativity and be sought out by a TEDx organizer. And I don't know the answer to that question, but I think one thing that might help is watching TED and TEDx talks to really see how other people are taking their own inspiration and experience and getting on the stage and delivering. And I think by way of exposure, people really find it in themselves. I think that's probably the most direct recipe, if there were a recipe.
How do you see artificial intelligence affecting the TEDx as an entire industry?
This topic came up at a meeting I had, and I'll protect kind of the privacy of what that meeting was. But I think as an organizer, I have to be mindful that we don't want AI, no offense, I love AI, writing TEDx talks. But in practice, I don't think that happens, because these talks are so close to people's hearts that they really have to sit with themselves to write these talks and be inspiring. That, in my opinion, right now as we are talking in February 2025, doesn't seem like it's necessary. It's almost like, yes, someone could write their entire, I think this is what you're referring to. Could someone write their whole TEDx talk on ChatGPT? Sure, I'm sure it's possible. But I think the speakers are motivated to do it for the right reasons, don't want someone else to write their talk, right? They want to deliver their message. It's a part of them that they're giving to the audience. And so that authenticity, I think just by the very nature of doing a TEDx talk, isn't as conducive to having something artificially written. But I could be wrong, and that's just my opinion. I think if you ask someone to do a cover letter for a job position, that's something that's like, oh God, I really don't know too much to write 2 pages myself. Let me just use some help there. That to me seems like a more logical use, for example, as opposed to telling your own personal story by completely leveraging ChatGPT, for example. That to me doesn't seem intuitive, but that's just one person's opinion.
What does the future with TEDx look like for you? I know you said you're super organized. You're already working on putting together 2026, while 2025 hasn't even gone through yet. So I can tell you're very future focused. What do you see the next 5 to 10 years looking like for you personally?
In the context of TEDx, right? Because I have many, many dreams. But in the context of TEDx, I hope brand continues to be something where we are able to source speakers from outside. So TEDx Catawba, just for way of background, is named after the river. The river runs from north through to South Carolina. And so we have a higher proportion of outside speakers from that area this year, just by nature of how it naturally went. But the hope is to rebalance that a little bit and have this kind of even mix between inside and outside so that ideas can continue to flow both ways. So I think that's one subtle change we'll see year over year. I think the other thing that I would like to see as this progresses is more of a community spirit around it. It's too early to have that community spirit, but I hope year 2, year 3, year 4, we see that additional traction to where people are excited and they're looking forward and they know, oh, every June we always have this. Hopefully that's the case. And that will help us build the brand and be an outlet for great ideas. There's so much we're doing here locally that I'm sure many people in maybe New York or San Francisco or wherever, they don't quite know the magic. And there's just, again, if you look at population growth and things like that, North Carolina is such a hot spot. And I think we'll continue to see more of that coming into the mainstream. And I hope that this is an avenue that we can use to gain some awareness on all the cool things we're doing here.
And what guidance would you give the speaker on? I know I was speaking to a TEDx organizer. Her name was Kat Haber, and she was like an old school TED folk, like been around TED since there was no TEDx. And she's been the TEDx Vail organizer for I don't know exactly how many years. I think it was 9 years now, something like that. And she was saying, man, one thing I think we could improve on TEDx as an organization is we're not so great at supporting speakers after they've delivered the TEDx talk. You having, this amazing business background, what would you do to support the speakers after they've given the TEDx talk?
It's interesting because I wouldn't say there's not a lot that's done afterwards to be supportive, period. It's probably in an organized fashion would be the way I'd finish that sentence. Because I do have a high majority of speakers where I've coached them 5-10 years ago and they're still in my orbit. So I think it's how do we do that maybe in a more curated and organized fashion? It's hard to say, if I'm honest, because it really depends. I doubt that Blaze is going to call me and ask me to help him, think about his next AI talk. Like there are certain things we do for certain speakers. There's no one size fits all. And for me, it's being available and helping where I can. I don't think it would be successful to say, oh, we have a post TEDx program where we do X, Y, and Z. You're just not going to get the traction with your more high profile experienced speakers because they don't need it. So for me, as an organizer, I'm available. I'm here. I will help. We do have the network. We have the brand. And just because someone's delivered their TEDx talk doesn't mean that the relationship is over. As an example, I have an academic, highly successful out of an Ivy League institution. I worked with him on one of his TEDx talks. We've stayed in touch ever since, even through drafting his second book, which is out now. And so it's really bespoke depending on that speaker and that relationship. Just like professional relationships and networking and friendships, it's just definitely not a one size fits all. And I would say that's why I believe as an organizer, it's important to know all the speakers, be involved in speaker coaching, because that's where the relationships are established. I think with some TEDx organizers, the speaker coaching and some of that is split up quite a bit. And there are varying levels of involvement, and it's not right and it's not wrong. But as it relates to your question, it's really helpful when the lead organizer has a really good relationship and knows those speakers inside and out, because then we can continue to help post TEDx and beyond.
And how do you intend to promote this event and get the people interested in the local community, which seems like you're very familiar with? How do you get those people in the local community to show up at your upcoming TEDx event?
I wish I had the handbook on that because it's been quite a learning experience. As you know, when we talked before I was in North Carolina, I lived in London. And before that, I lived in Johannesburg. So this is not where I grew up. I've lived here in North Carolina for going on 5 years. So for me, it's getting myself immersed in the community. Where are the influential areas that can raise awareness? So for example, it may be working with the city, which we're doing, or potentially the Arts Council, which we're doing. And so I think, again, it's figuring out what avenues in the community are going to be influential to allow awareness to sort of be organic. And then, of course, there are other avenues to gain awareness, whether it's your website or social media. We're actually at the farmers market, surprisingly, in February, and then again in April. So we're in a lot of places. It's a multi-dimensional, multi-path strategy here. And, I think I'll be able to tell you next year what worked and what didn't. I'm sure we'll have some successes and we'll have some areas that we want to improve on, but we're sort of testing multiple paths as we go along.
What do you think a lot of professional speakers get wrong when they're trying to get their idea that they've been speaking on so consistently already to the TEDx stage?
I don't know if there is a wrong. It's not binary. So first. Second is where I see people get tripped up. Maybe that's a better way to look at it. I have one speaker I worked with 2023 who was absolutely brilliant. Version 1 of the talk was brilliant and version 10 of the talk was brilliant. It was all brilliant. I think some people get tripped up in making it perfect, and the definition of perfect can become all consuming when perfect already existed. So there's only so many times that someone, and it's not a criticism, can dry run before you can say, okay, got this. And even if it comes out on the day of a little bit differently, it's okay, because that's natural and that's authentic. So it can be stressful. There's a reason why people are like, oh, you haven't done a TEDx talk. I'm like, well, I'm not sure I have a great idea. But beyond that, that's an intimidating and tall ask. I'd much rather be on the other side of the stage or being the MC. That's a lot easier. So there's a lot of pressure. And I think there's a lot of, which ties back to your question on AI. It's such a personal thing that it doesn't lend itself to that type of technology, in my opinion, right now, because it is so personal. And I think people, when they get up on the stage, just really want it to be perfect. And that's great. But what is perfect? And I think perfect isn't necessarily you have every word script out exactly the way you want it. Just some of the authenticity and ability to be ad-libbing a little bit is a beautiful thing. And people should be comfortable with that. I think that's artistic and it's amazing.
That's what makes a speaker sometimes, right? For your event, is there a strategy or a message that you are considering when you design the order in which every talk is delivered? Meaning, oh, the AI one is first, and then this one is second, and then this one's third. Is there a specific way you decide that order 1 through 12?
So the first thing I usually do is group them together. So if you will, like a brother and sister, like which 2 talks are closest together. So to give you an example, we've got former Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 7, and then we have a 9/11 survivor. So grouping them together kind of in the bucket of resilience, if you will. So I look at all the speakers and look for kind of cohesive themes. And then I put them into blocks and kind of spread them out accordingly. You don't always want to start necessarily with what would be logical, right? Like you said, oh, well, it'd be logical to start with, for example, we talked about Blaze. We may or may not do that. We want some elements of surprise and excitement and anticipation. So I think making it not necessarily straightforward and predictable is fun too. And then, of course, sprinkling in some other surprises in the day makes it quite fun.
What do you think you mentioned that about 80% of the applications you received at your event were I'm a consultant or I have this consulting firm. What can the person that is in that position that does want to give a TEDx talk do differently to increase the likelihood of getting accepted to a TEDx stage?
I think, again, it's sort of flipping it on its head and saying not what's in it for me, but what's in it for everybody else. Like, no offense, like nobody wants to hear why it's good for you or me, right? We want to know why it's good for everybody else. And so, like many things, when the topic is approached from a self-centered perspective, that doesn't resonate. So to me, I think it goes back to the same answer. It really needs to be thought of as something that can benefit the whole and benefit all of the listeners. It's about great ideas. It's not about the Christine show or the Ryan show, right? And so we need to stay true to that goal and that objective. And I think if people have that mindset, then it makes more sense. I also think, and I'm not a genius here, but a lot of times I think, and there's guidance on TED's website website about? You don't have to have this amazingly novel idea where you reinvent something scientific. But at the same time, you really need to think about, why is this a great idea that an audience member or a member of a community would want to know and know more about? So I guess it's saying it the same way, but a little bit different in terms of the mechanics of digging deep to say, okay, I think I have an idea. Okay, well, why would you care? And so that's the way I think about it anyway.
And how can one of those people make their idea more relevant to the audience than relevant to themselves? What can they switch inside their own head to make the audience and the other person who they're speaking to the number one priority in their talk that they're not doing right now?
I'm just saying, what I would do is test it with people and be like, hey, I have this idea. I want to do this TEDx talk. This is why I think it's interesting. People will tell you, especially friends and family. It's like, hey, do I look bad in this outfit? Yes. My mom would tell me, oh my God, don't wear that. So I would test it with friends and say, what do you think? Would this be interesting? Should I talk about this? And I think, like, whether we love it or not, our family and friends, if they're good family and friends, will be honest with you. So that's probably number one. And I think number two is think about why you're doing the TEDx talk in the first place. I think if the primary reason is because you want to do a TEDx talk, I'm not sure that that's the right reason. I think it really has to be about the idea and about the community, because it's all about the sense of community and the great ideas, not about me increasing my revenue by 200% next year. So it comes back to fundamentals, I think, as well. So it's a self-reflection thing.
It's interesting. It sounds like you position the TEDx talk as more the vehicle to spread the idea. The TEDx event is more kind of, in a sense, between the idea and the person. It's the invisible vehicle that delivers the idea to the person in the most efficient manner. Or am I hearing you totally wrong?
I think that's right. If you look at the amount of followers and traction TED has, its reputation, and the rigor that goes behind kind of designing talks, I think that that's accurate. It's probably one of the, if not the biggest platform for delivering those types of ideas and talks.
What time limit are you doing for your event, given your speakers?
We follow the TED guidelines, so 18-minute max. But people always ask me, well, do I have to do 18 minutes? Can I do less? I think practically speaking, the range I see is that most of my speakers in the past have been around either 16 minutes. There's some shorter ones at 12 minutes. And then you have a few that need to be cut down because they're like in the 20s. So I don't think there's a right answer other than meet the guidelines. And that's sort of if someone comes in with a 10-minute talk or 12-minute talk, I think as long as the idea resonates and it's smooth and it flows. I went to TED last year, and I think it might have been TED Next. There was a 10-minute talk, and I watched all the timers, and it was delivered beautifully. It doesn't have to be 18 minutes, but it can't be 19.
I know the TED Next event that was in Atlanta, I think in October, a few months ago, as of when we're recording this right now, their limit was 8. And a few of the organizers I've spoke to that were there, they said, yeah, it was 8 minutes. And I said, why do you think they're doing that? And I want to hear what you think. Why do you think TED is bringing that down?
They're not. I could be wrong, so please fact check me on this. I think they're referring to a particular round at TED Next, not the general TED guidelines. So if my memory serves me right, there was a section of TED Next that had shorter talks. But beyond that, I believe the 18-minute rule held. But fact check me and check that that's right. I can't remember all of the background behind why that was tested, but I'll skip to, because I wasn't part of that in any way, the decision making there, but it was interesting and people were successful at it. I remember one talk in particular, I believe it was on a manufacturing concept, turning, it was like something with glass or sand or something, I can't quite remember. And the message was delivered in that time frame. It was beautiful. And I completely got the idea, the concept, the vision, and it definitely resonated with me to where I felt their journey. So I don't know the answer to your question on why they did that, but I think, to be clear, I do not believe in any way that's changed like the general guide.
How does someone deliver and do what you just said of the story with this person that delivered that idea in 8 minutes with the sand and the glass? How does someone strategically, what's the framework they do to deliver that much valuable content in such an efficient and succinct way? What do they do to make that happen?
I always tell people to start with an outline. So what is your idea? How do you structure it? And so if it's, you have this, it's like storytelling, right? There's different arcs in your story. So really laying it out on a piece of paper, because I think if you don't do that, you sort of don't have a place to start. So what's my key message? And underneath that, what are like the 3 or 4 sub key messages or stories? So if you line up the messages on one side, then you take, say, your personal story and you figure out how you're going to weave it together. That can be a good way to be succinct as you start to build out your script.
Now, two more questions for you here. Number one, where can someone listening find your TEDx event and you online? People that maybe follow it or go to the website, anything like that?
Yeah, so we are on all the social media outlets. It's TEDx Catawba. I do a lot of posting on LinkedIn, my personal page, so that's available. Our website is an excellent source of information, TEDxCatawba.com. And then our page is also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. So we're growing that footprint. I would say the website's probably the best place to find us. And then we're also on the TED website, given the nature of the event. So for basic information, people can go there as well.
Awesome. And can you spell out the TEDx event just so they know the exact letters that make up the event?
Yes, I think we have TEDx down, so that, and then Catawba.
Okay. Awesome. Now, from all your years of experience with TEDx, with speaking, building your speakers bureau, helping speakers, coaching speakers for TEDx events, now organizing a TEDx event and already planning the one next year, what is one nugget of knowledge that you would extract from that experience that you would want to share with the aspiring speaker, the professional speaker, or the entrepreneur who speaks to grow their business?
I know this sounds very cliche, but what comes to mind, given the question, is just be yourself, be authentic. And I think the rest kind of fills itself in. So that would be my piece of advice. Other than also looking at it from the outside perspective on why someone would be interested in your talk, as opposed to the look at why I'm interested in speaking. So having that perspective as well. That's two, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Make it relevant to someone else. Yeah, makes sense. Well, guys, if you're listening here and you found value in what Christine has shared with us today, share it with that one friend that you think needs to hear what she said. And maybe you have a friend in North Carolina that you're like, get that TEDx talk, and maybe they need to attend it. You never know. It might be that one
Yes,
thing that
please
makes that one
attend.
difference in their life today.
We
There you
would
go. She
love to
wants to go.
have everyone attend.
What's your audience cap this year?
We have an audience cap of 392, I think. 396,
Nice.
let's say 392, so I don't violate fire code.
Well, you guys, if you're listening, you want to be one of those 390, you know where to find it. She said the website. Share this with that one friend. Like I said, it might be that 1 inch difference today that 10 years from now, they're living a totally different life just because you made that one favor for them. You shared it with them. So go ahead and do that. Christine, thank you for taking the time to be here. And guys, thank you for listening.